I'm Paige. Welcome back to my kitchen. You're watching the next episode of Doughing It with Paigey. Today we will be making the Chocolate Babka Recipe from the cookbook Bread Baking for Beginners by Bonnie Ohara. Now, I always like to joke that I would only make this bread for people that I really like because it is a little bit time consuming to make. We're going to end up layering this dough with some homemade chocolate fudge, and we'll be using techniques that are similar to the cinnamon roll video that we made a couple of weeks ago. When we're done with this bread, we can expect some very pretty, intricate chocolate swirls inside of our bread. This may be a very time-consuming bread, but it is very fun to make, so let's go ahead and get started weighing out our ingredients. In separate bowls, I start off by weighing out my flour, salt, yeast, and eggs. In a large bowl, I'll weigh out my butter, milk, and sugar. We'll then add our egg mixture directly on top of this and our yeast on top of that. And we'll just go ahead and start whisking everything together until it's nice and smooth. When everything is mixed together well, we'll go ahead and add our flour on top of this mixture and our salt on top of the flour. And we'll just jump right in and start mixing this by hand. Just try to get in there and squeeze your dough, scrape all of the dry ingredients off the sides of the bowl, and just really try to get everything as smooth as possible. Your goal here is to get your dough really stretchy like this. Now that our ingredients are well mixed, we're gonna go ahead and let this rest for about 30 minutes so that the flour can absorb some of those wet ingredients. All right, it's been about 30 minutes. Our dough is done resting. Let's go ahead and start kneading it. We're just gonna turn our dough out of the bowl onto a floured countertop. I usually like to keep a bowl of flour near me just so I can easily access that while I'm kneading. All right, so you guys know the drill. To knead, all we're gonna do is push forward with the heel of our hand, pull the dough back, give it a quarter turn, and do the same thing. So again, that's forward, back, turn. Forward, back, turn. And as you get familiar with that motion, you can kind of speed it up. And you'll see here, I'm pushing this forward, I'm kind of grabbing it from underneath, and I'm just pulling this back and kind of giving it all one turn in one single motion. Now, if your dough starts to get really sticky to the counter, don't panic. I usually try to continue kneading this until it's almost unmanageable, and then I'll just take my dough scraper, release this from the countertop, add a little bit more flour, and I'll just continue to knead my dough. And we're going to continue doing this for about 5 to 10 minutes until the dough has tightened up. You can tell here our dough has really started to kind of stay together. It's not really as stretchy as it was when we first started kneading it, so that means it is almost done being kneaded. So we're gonna go ahead and pop this back into the bowl and cover this up with a floured kitchen towel. We're gonna let this rise for 2 hours. It's been about 2 hours, our dough is done rising, and this is what it looks like. Now that our dough is done rising, we're gonna go ahead and pop this in the fridge for about 2 hours just so it can kind of firm up so it's a little bit easier to manage and roll out. In the meantime, we're gonna go ahead and make our chocolate fudge. We're gonna start off by weighing out our cocoa powder and sugar, and then we'll go ahead and weigh out our heavy cream directly into the saucepan. We'll transfer our saucepan over to the stove, and then we'll add in our cocoa and sugar mixture. And we'll just whisk this up until it's smooth and starts to barely simmer. Once it starts to simmer, we're gonna go ahead and add in our butter, and we'll just whisk this up until it's nice and smooth and it looks really shiny. Now, if you're making this at home, just be sure to remember to put your chocolate fudge inside of the refrigerator for at least 30 minutes so it can kind of stiffen up and it's a little bit easier to spread out over our dough. All right, it's been about 2 hours. I just took our dough out of the fridge. We're gonna go ahead and get this rolled out and pre-shaped. So I'm gonna add a little bit of flour to my countertops here just in case my dough gets kind of sticky. We're gonna turn our dough out of the bowl. Now I'm gonna add a little bit of flour to my dough as well. I'm gonna roll this out into a rough 9 by 16 inch rectangle. If your dough gets very sticky to the rolling pin, just add a little bit more flour to your dough and continue to roll that out. Now I'm going to take my chilled chocolate fudge and spread this all over the rectangle, leaving a small strip on the farthest side for me. Now we're just going to go ahead and roll this up. Now the side that we left uncovered with that chocolate fudge, that is what's going to seal the dough to itself. So I'm just going to go all along that line and just kind of pinch the dough to seal this seam. Now I'm going to transfer this over to a baking sheet and we're going to pop it in the freezer for about 15 minutes for this to chill. I just took our dough out of the freezer. We're going to go ahead and get this shaped into a loaf. I'm going to start off by spraying a loaf pan with a little bit of cooking spray. So we're going to start off by cutting this lengthwise into 2 equal pieces. I'm just using my dough scraper to do this. You can also use a knife. I like to turn the cut side up because it leaves intricate swirls on the top of your bread. And all we're gonna do is kind of wrap these around each other in a 2-strand braid. We're gonna go ahead and put this into our loaf pan. We're just kind of going to bend this and fold this to fit into the pan. Now I just want to let everybody know I have tried a 3-strand braid on the Chocolate Babka before. I think that it was wrapped a little bit too tightly. It really didn't proof as well as I wanted it to, so this time I'm only using a 2-strand braid. So we're going to let this proof for about 2 hours until it reaches the top of the loaf pan. Now keep in mind it was just in the freezer, and before that it was in the refrigerator for about 2 hours. So those colder temperatures are really going to slow down this proofing process. Now the book says 1.5 to 2 hours, but in my experience making this bread, it's usually a little bit closer to 2.5 to 3 hours. So we'll come back and check it when it's ready. It's been about 3 hours, our dough is done proofing, and here is what it looks like. All right, as you can see, our loaf didn't really bubble up over the top of the loaf pan like the other loaves that we've made in this book. The braided enriched breads really just don't proof up as much as the other breads. However, I know this one's ready. My oven's been preheating at 375, so we're gonna go ahead and pop that in there and we're gonna check it right around 30 minutes. All right, our bread is done cooling. I let it cool inside of the loaf pan for about 10 minutes just because that chocolate fudge is really gooey when it gets out of the oven. After it set in the loaf pan for about 10 minutes, I moved it over to a wire rack and let it set for about 20 more minutes. It smells so good in here. I'm so ready to try this. Let's go ahead and do a taste test. So the babka turned out so good. It is just a really rich and filling bread. I can say if you like chocolate, you're probably going to love this bread. It will definitely satisfy a sweet craving. Now be sure to tune in next week because we are making challah, and I'm so excited about that because it is our last enriched bread. After that, we are moving on to pre-ferments, and I am so excited that we have finally made it to that point. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, be sure to subscribe, and thanks again for watching Dough in It with Paigey. I'll see you guys next time.
Yeah.
Okay. Are we done with this in 5 minutes? We need to redo it.
We did roll it out, swirl, we did all that, roll this up, transfer it over to a baking sheet, pop this in the freezer.
Is that good? Wait, what am I saying?
More.
What video?
More.
My? Alright, was that it? Was that all we had to do?
I think so. Helpful.
I don't know if I can do this. Yep. Do I look like a hot mess?
No.
You hesitated. Was that weird?
No.
Should I say something about how it doesn't look cute right now?
I
Chocolate
think that
lovers?
if you